Hello, my name is Marty Windle, the SBL guru, and welcome to the SBL podcast. In this episode, we focus on speaking to the SBL examining team. Now, this occurred at the ACCA conference where the SBL examining team were faced with a number of questions. In this podcast, I've edited down the responses from the SBL examining team. I've used my voice to ask the questions, but I've also given a little comment about what we can learn from what the examining team said. So please enjoy. This is part one. There'll also be a part two coming up as well. So the first question they asked at the conference was, how much time should candidates take when they're reviewing the pre-scene material?
Every person reads and analyzes at a different pace. So we can't really be prescriptive. We don't advise those spending more than a few hours, which will allow you to read and understand the pre-scene and look up any terms that are not understood. So extensive industry research of 6, 9, 10 hours isn't needed. After all, we are all accountants, not specialists in the industry, and the questions will be based on accounting and syllabus ideas.
So this is a great response, and I think it points to some of the issues that students have where they spend hours and hours and hours analyzing the pre-scene. Keep it relatively short, spend a few hours looking at it, but also the most important thing, make sure your technical knowledge is good, make sure you know your models, make sure you practice the past paper questions. That is much more important than spending hours and hours examining the pre-scene material. And that's from the examiner. So listen to what the examiner is saying. They expect you to have a broad industry knowledge, but you don't have to try to anticipate the company. It's not going to happen. So the next question focused on what are the areas in which students need to do better in the exam? What are the areas of weaknesses for the current students?
Quite a broad one, but yes. So as we've sort of suggested, copying and pasting isn't a good idea, but being slightly more specific, candidates not using a format or model that is clearly suggested won't help. So if we ask for benefits and drawbacks, we would expect the answer to be organized around benefits and drawbacks, not say I'm producing a suitability, acceptability, feasibility style answer. We don't want candidates to ask questions in their responses and then not answer those questions. Even if we're demonstrating skepticism where we want them to question things, we also want them to provide us with answers. We're asking the questions. Students are meant to be giving us their considered and evaluated answers. On risk questions, we do sometimes have candidates going into huge details about the situation in the pre-scene or in the exhibit rather than specifying what the risk is and what the impact is. And that's what we need to get down to. So we need to drill all the way down to what is the risk and what is the impact rather than just talking around the subject. And finally, when we ask for a recommendation, which even if it's not stated, may also apply to questions that ask for an evaluation, not actually providing that is not going to serve candidates very well. Saying that further analysis is required before you can come to a conclusion is not really what we want. That's like in a tax exam saying, oh, you need a tax expert for this when that is your role. So just saying there are benefits and drawbacks without coming to a conclusion is not going to be enough when we want a recommendation.
Some important messages there from the exam team. Now, in the exam, you are normally a consultant. You're in a consultancy role. So if you're a consultant going into a business, you don't say at the end of your consultancy report, there should be some additional analysis required. They're asking for your opinion, they're asking for your analysis, and they're asking for your recommendations. So never say further analysis is required before we make a decision. You're there to make a decision as a consultant. You're there to give advice. So retain that role as a consultant. Make sure you give advice, and that's what they're looking for. Now, there's a potential mark here that you might want to consider. If they ask you for an evaluation, it seems to imply the examiner is saying, if you get an evaluation, you should, at the end of that, come up with some kind of what is bigger, the benefits or the problems, or what are the bigger issues from this evaluation? Is it good overall or is it bad overall? So there might be some sort of summary or some overall consideration you might want to mention in your role as a consultant. Also, on risk questions, be specific. What is the question asking for? Don't write lots of things that they're not asking for in the question. Focus on the examination question. The next question focused on areas of the syllabus where the students did not perform particularly well.
Yes, and I think I both know the area and why. It's the final sections of the syllabus. So section H of the syllabus, we often see a lack of knowledge there that is statistically greater than any lack of knowledge shown anywhere else. This suggests that maybe the students haven't got to that section yet. They haven't quite completed their studies. In particular, the areas that we do see students fall down in knowledge terms on are performance excellence and project management. I mean, they're two that just stand out. They're quite glaringly obvious for us.
So I think the important takeaway from there is they can ask anything on the entire syllabus in the examination, but people are weak on the performance measurement. The takeaway there is that they can ask anything from the entire syllabus, so make sure you don't neglect the later parts of the syllabus. They asked a question recently about Baldridge, but also there was a question on project management there that is specifically mentioned by the exam team. If they feel students aren't revising it properly, they're likely to ask it again in the future. So make sure your knowledge of project management, the project management life cycle, the documents used, the role of the people on the project is well understood, as it may focus in future exam questions. So the next question was, would the exam include ethical issues, and are those ethical issues going to be clearly highlighted?
Exams are always going to include some form of ethical issue, but we don't put a big red star around on it and highlight it and necessarily say, this is the ethics bit, folks, because that's not how ethics is in real life. But anything that we look at and we might question, anything questionable, anything unusual, students should spot, particularly if they have completed ESPM, the ethics module. Candidates, both in their working life and in the exam, should be alert for ethical problems and are expected to be able to identify those issues that could be raised as ethical or bring ethical components into an answer as part of a wider discussion. So yes, always ethics, but no, it might not be a standout, a director has done this wrong, or somebody has stolen this, that, or the other. So it's not always highlighted.
I think the important takeaway here is that you've got to have a sound knowledge of ethical issues. Make sure you know about the IFAC Code of Ethics, because it can come in a specific question, but you can also bring in ethical issues in a number of different areas. So it can come in lots of places. Make sure your ethical knowledge is strong, and make sure you've done the ethic and professional skills module before you do your SBL exam, because this has shown significant increase in pass rates for those that do the ethics and professional skills module. So make sure you've completed that. So that is the end of part 1 of our discussion with the SBL examining team. There will be a part 2, so don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. If you're interested in any of my courses, please contact me at www.sblguru.com. I'll put a link in the description to this podcast.